people don't know what, for instance, environment control. There's nothing to be done about man's living. Just to make that terribly clear to you today, it's still absolutely there. If anybody gets into architecture building, just you don't have to be an architect, however. You do not talk about the buildings around in London in terms of weight. Yet you do talk about all your ships at the sea, and you know exactly what the big tankers weigh, you know, just what the Queen Mary weighed, you know, the 747 weighs, you know exactly what you're getting out of every ounce of material you put in, out of every berg of energy, and out of every second of time invested. You have an exact set of performance requirements, exactly what it takes to do it. But on the land, we're still going on very enormous superstitions and things. The bigger and heavier and higher, the more secure. So I saw that nobody really ever looked into to see what you might really need to take care of human beings. And this became really very exciting to me, just in terms of a grand scientific challenge. What do we need for environment control? Man's going to need a lot of things. Let's not try to stop things. For instance, we need a lot of water. You're going to perish. But you can't drink it all when it rains. How do I intercept the rain and get a holding pattern to flow into our circulatory system and the magnitudes and frequencies of work? I saw what I call environment control, and got to be some way of dealing with environment as a great complex of events, and not things. And they had all these different frequencies and magnitudes, and then environment control would be some way of giving man this kind of advantage. But also, I saw it absolutely necessary to do the most with the least. And obviously, a sphere, for instance, would enclose most volume with the least surface. I had to venture into that. Also, I found that the only stable polygon is triangle. So an omni-triangulated sphere will give you the most volume of the least surface and give you the greatest strength of this material. You understand exactly how I got to geodesic that very securely on that basis. I can see that there's no accident that nature, when she had important phenomena, I had was not cubes. I think it was spheroidal. And all the fruits and all the eggs and everything nature had of any importance was in spheroids, and whether atoms or planets. And so that I said, I found people are not familiar with the idea of this kind of structure, that for the moment is absolutely irrelevant. And then must really engage in seeing exactly how much is necessary to serve human beings, to give them the protection they need, let in what they want when they want it, keep out what they don't want when they don't want it. And this brought me into a totally new kind of a world. And I can really say to you now, categorically, that there are now over 100,000 of these geodesic zones somewhere around the world. And most of them are really going into places where nothing else will work. I should say one over the exact South Pole right now, the exact South Pole. And the scientists found at the South Pole a lake a mile deep. Borings there indicated you're going to learn something about biological life on that continent, which could be very important for humanity to know about. You could not, if the wind get up 180 miles an hour, snow, absolutely dry, drifting around, you can't go around boring under those conditions. So they had to have a comprehensive environment control, covering a large enough area to make it really worthwhile to have the different kinds of samples. And they found that the geodesic dome was the only thing it had. Arctic snow loads of 60 pounds per square foot. This had to, if they 300 pounds per square foot, it's going to be the Antarctic thing that gets covered with snow right away, get buried very, very deep with fantastic pressures. So this had to be designed to be gradually buried very, very deeply, go down through tunnels into it. But then it came one big environment control, and they have secondary little research stations around which they move around. And those conditions didn't have to heat the bigger one. There's the heat coming out of the small ones where they are. Leak out in the large one, it's a powerful kind of an atmosphere. Anyway, this dome is almost as large as the Expo Dome in Montreal, but it was light enough and so beautifully designed that it could go and do airplane loads and could be assembled within a very critical short time, and man would not perish there at the South Pole, and be able to do all those things. Nothing else could meet up with those requirements. So going into the omni-triangulated spherical structure now, as I say, it's out of Mount Fuji. It is a weather radar, but the winds are incredible, and yet it's light enough to be taken up by one helicopter installed, and the space inside is equivalent of 5 8-room houses. It's a good big sphere. Yet helicopters live don't do that so much as I do. I do, all the engineering on all the structures we do have up that have been major installations had to be calculated with the well-known engineering structural analysis, had to be satisfied engineers, the building departments and so forth. And managers, all that work is done, always done what's called continuous compression. There's no calculation in engineering of buildings that understands tensegrity or discontinuous compression, which is the way the universe is put together, where the moon and the earth don't touch each other. Nothing touches each other. So we have these beautiful mass interactions with alloying and so forth. And so I found that when I really get into what size structures I now know how to produce, provided with disarmament, I can really use these extraordinary forges and beautiful things used in making guns. I have that kind of tooling. I can give you 300 buildings for one. Against the best known engineering strategies today, I can give you 300 environmental controls for one against the best known building masters today. And I now know what I'm talking about, such extended that I can really say categorically, also in energy studies. Just a very simple matter that when we double the dimension of the dome, we get 2 to the second power of the surface, or 4 times the surface, and the volume is 2 to the third power. So every time I double the size of a dome, I have 8 times as much atmosphere inside, and I have only 4 times as much surface. So every time I double, I halve the amount of surface, which the interior molecule of atmosphere can gain and lose heat. This is well known again in the ship world of yesterday. When you double the size and length of your ship, you have 8 times as much payload and only 4 times as much surface of friction to drive the ship through. So the bigger you made your ship, the more efficient it became. So I see this had absolute pertinence and relevance when it came to doing the buildings, to try to get the bigger and bigger building, etc. When I got into all the energy studies and the recirculating way back in 1927, started then on the semi-autonomous dwelling where you would take advantage of the energies in the human waste and so forth, and would use our wind powers. As of this last year, late June, early July, at the University of Pennsylvania, a group of young people who were leaders of whom had been in a number of my World Games operations, and very, very capable group came together. And they took the problem, a very specific problem, and the problem was getting all the world to enjoy the same amount of energy advantage that had been operating in the United States as very much higher than elsewhere around the world, taking 1972 energy income per capita in the United States, to get this capability to the rest of the world. And looking into the fact then that we can now, due to ultra-high voltage transmission of electrical power, from World War I through up to a decade ago, 350 miles is the limit of deliverability of the electrical current. You have to go higher and higher voltages. The higher and higher voltages require so much insulating equipment over that the factors will go higher. But to get us now ultra-high voltage, we're able to deliver 1,500 miles. So in the energy studies we made, we then looked at all the water power which had not been used before, because it was not, 350 miles would not bring the power to any class of civilization. At the 1,500-mile region, a very different picture comes in. Looking then at all the proven tidal power capabilities, all the proven thermal heat capabilities, all the proven windmill capabilities, and taking the actual technology already operative with those proven capabilities, going into a critical path study, such as going to the moon, first things first to be done, how long it would take to order this equipment and get it installed. Went into the study then of bringing this energy to all of humanity, and we found that by 1985 we could have the whole world operating the same energy advantage as the United States in 1972, while concurrently phasing out all fossil fuels and all atomic energy. This became a very exciting piece of information. Because we found this was not being fostered at all by big governments and big because the energy exploiting companies wanted something going over a pipe or a wire. They don't like human beings where a rich man may have a sailing boat, but you just put up your sail and suddenly you get the energy right directly from cosmic energy to go around our planet. And so that he's exploiting concepts that will not foster these kinds of undertakings, just looking at it. And there's enormous commitment politically towards atomic powers or oil development. So even though we've found something, we really know it is not going to necessarily be out there. But the point is that this is now actually beautiful piece of engineering and can be employed. There's no group of human beings with integrity to study and say this and so. Now, I could then say, in terms of my knowledge of energy and environment controlling, my knowledge of how much resources we really need to give human beings high living advantage, make it possible to get from here to there and do the things they need to do. I now could say categorically that I know that the resources we've already mined, and this is an important one for you, human beings have not realized this regarding the metals. It's not in the general thinking yet. But metals are behaviors of the universe. They are, and the relative abundance of metals will remain very constant in the universe. And the metals can be melted up again and can be reused. I was interested on our planet today. 80% of all the copper going in production annually is coming out of scrap from yesterday. Only 20% is now coming from the mines. You have to go less and less to the mines and continually recirculate. We have the Bell Laboratory chief engineer in 1930 in New York finding out and being able to announce that the telephone company could expand the telephone service from 10% of humanity then enjoying it to all the people around the planet without the telephone company mining or buying another pound of copper. But they were learning to get so many more messages over each cross-section of copper wire. And he said that throughout the whole of the expansion of the telephone system from 10% to 100% of humanity, the telephone companies would be copper sellers and have it. There's a point now where one communication satellite weighing 1/4 of a ton is outperforming 175,000 tons of copper cable to transatlantic communication. And it's doing very much higher fidelity. Now, multiply 175,000 by 4, and you get a little idea of the enormous step up that occurs as you begin. I find the metals then come out of all the investments that they stay in buildings longer than they're doing in telephones. They stay in automobiles a little longer than they do in the airplane, etc. So there's the whole of all the metals, you take the total bulk, they come out every 22.5 years. Get recirculated every 22.5 years. And as they come around 22.5 years later, the interim gain in know-how is so extraordinary. Just use a very simple one. You melt up one Cadillac and get 2 Japanese. Very much better cars. Every time they come around and take care of more people, higher performance. Same metal. So what we do is, there really is, in fact, a kind of bloodstream of the metals. Slow compared to our blood flow, but it is just actually that. And every time it comes around, we have more information to mount on that bloodstream. To take care of more people. So I can say then, with the knowledge we already have, with the metals we've already mined, I now know that it's feasible to take care of all of humanity at a higher standard of living than anyone's ever known, and it can be done by 1985. And therefore I know that all politics are opposite. I know that all wars are opposite. It doesn't have to be me at all. I now know that man is not supposed to be fearless, it's family designed to be success. This is a very extraordinary realization. I said, when you first really have to be confronted with this information, get at it, and but you know experiment which you're talking about. And I realized then that really one of the worst of all the weapons of the war was what lying, because man said, you know, this man's sitting on the life support over here, and if I deceive him, get him out of the way, better than just now killing him. So lying became one of the great weapons employed by man. And since the universe operates on truth and not on lies, nothing man could have done such a disfavor himself as to get into the lying that they have. So I simply find it a very sad matter. When I was young, I was being told by the older people now, never mind what you think, really learn. This is where the game goes. And I've been told never to do my own thinking. I also was being So get over your sensitivity. Life is tough. I found young of yesterday were losing their beautiful sensitivity. They were not doing their own thinking. An enormous bureaucracy, all the great tradition, really enormous momentum, what I just said. People know that my boss says, I don't want to get my family in trouble, so they continually inform me. But one must realize that it's due to the fear generated by the love and the sense of responsibility. So I now know that lying is unnecessary. Lying only came about because man thought there's not enough to go around. And this seemed to be sort of easier way. Instead of having to kill the other man, he just kept silent when he knew it wasn't true, so he could get the job. So I now then know that the whole concept that you have to earn a living. If you wish to earn a living, it's because you'd assume there's nowhere nearly enough to go around. Therefore, you have to prove yourself an exception so that the people who are in the life support control are going to let you in if they need you. You have to make good with the system. Somebody say, I now know that's invalid. I know we're here not to for the muscle machine, not to be some automaton, not to be specialists, but really have comprehensive concern about what it's all about, which every child is born that way. And I have to realize that the reason we have then specialization or so forth goes back to very simple facts of, once you think about early human being being born bigger than some other human being. He didn't ask to be, but he's a big man, and they got these bananas around, and the little man said, Mister, I can't reach a banana, reach another banana. But then the little people say, these other people coming after our bananas, Mr. Big Man, get out here and try to defend us. So this big man found himself being continually conducted by society for critical moments of survival. So he said, if I'm going to have to do the fighting for you, we're not going to have little time to prepare for this. So gradually I got a command situation during the peacetime. So it gets to be king. But this is, if you understand how the power structure developed. Obviously, man being born naked and helpless. I can understand that perfectly. I understand then that big man instinctively doesn't have to have very much education to do this. Don't let two of those big men come at me at once. One of them, I seem to be the toughest big man around it. So two of those guys who really took me up. So that we have then the instinct that not only divide and conquer, but to keep conquered, keep divided. So I need you big men for when the wars come around, they're going to organize you. I'm going to make you a duke of this hill, make you a duke of that hill. I'm going to have my spies watch you, sure you don't gang up with me. So this was, you might see really what this power structure has been through history. It's nothing to be more human and spontaneous, what I'm saying. Anyway, he then was greatly bothered by other than the big one who could overpower him, because he found a lot of little people who were not good fighters, but they were very clever. And they were stealing from him. They were not paying his orders. So he said, big man, bring in this character. He's really a troublemaker. And I said, I'm going to cut your head off, young man. And he said, Mr. King, I think you made a great mistake. I said, you're in the president also. Why shouldn't I cut your head off? Well, Mr. King, I understand the language of your enemy over the hill, and you don't. I know what your enemy is saying you're trying to do to him, you don't. You got a pretty good idea, young man. You report me every day what my enemy is saying over there, and your head's going to stay on. You're going to do something you never did before. You're going to eat regularly. How do you like that? If you do very well, I'm going to give you a little purple. So this way, this man is stealing from him and said, Mr. King, you don't understand arithmetic, and I do. That's how people can steal from him. Instead of cutting my head off, and use the arithmetic that people can steal from you, that make out of the better. That's a pretty good idea. So whatever it was, this man can make better swords and better methods. He said, you mind your own business, you mind your business, you mind your business. I don't want to mind their business, I couldn't clear. So he gets so many specialists working so competently for him. He gets so much information about his enemies or their heels that he gets to have his kingdom get bigger and bigger. And he's now getting old and he wants his grandson to take over. So he sees these people saying, I want you to teach somebody about that language that you did. I want you to teach somebody about that arithmetic and so forth. This is the foundation of Oxford University. I really understand it's exactly how man got into specialization. And we just take India, the case of India, which the more northerly people are, the more kinds of environmental conditions they have to deal with. In Africa, you come to Lake, the lake is just all water, and you want to have to go way around and go above and see where it flows. But you come to Lake Baikal in eastern Russia, and you bend a boat in the summer and event skates in winter. You find that the more annual environment, the more inventive man had to be. He didn't make it clever, but he had more occasion. Because the people in the north began to have more tools with, and with their tools and their mobile tools, they kept invading India. The people of the south, and as you did so, the Congress say, "Boy, you have a beautiful language. Don't let anybody change that language. You better love the language too. You keep your language. You keep your religion. You better love your religion." Within a number of seconds, everything in India could not be more divided against itself, absolutely deliberately. This is one of the things they're really up against today. I want them to understand how the specialization occurred, but also it is very important for us to know that scientifically the biologists have discovered, and the anthropologists, the human tribes have become extinct, and biological species become extinct. The one thing common to their becoming extinct is over-specialization. And over-specialization is always, you can inbreed fast-running capability. The horse, by taking two fast-running horses, the probability of the genes to bring this about being concentrated is high, but you do so at the expense of breeding out general adaptability. And I'll give you general adaptability. The big things occur very much less frequently than the little things, so that you breed out general adaptability and get on very nicely under the smaller pattern, the local pattern, or the thing you're really looking for now to exploit this fast-running capability, whatever it may be. But you beat out general adaptability, and when suddenly the big thing happens, then that species all through. Because you lost the capability to get on under those variable conditions. So I say human society is in an enormously critical position of everybody electing somebody to act for them, assuming that you and I don't have the capability, we're much too busy with our specialization, proving our right to live and all that. So humanity leaving it to a very few to carry things out, and that very few are doing it politically. I'm not in the condition of really understanding generalized principles and the science and things I've just given you. The big thing is that I'm terribly excited to realize that various individuals I'm absolutely convinced that I could not be more typical example of just a healthy, average human being. But I, by good fortune, had things happen to me that made me look here and look there. And so I happened to be the first really look over the hill and see what the man is designed to be a success and not afraid of. I come back to the other things I've said to you. As in mind, I'd like to understand why he is here, and he apparently is absolutely unique. So my way of looking at that is the following. I'm going to take a very complicated design, and I find society tending then to think nothing of anything anymore. So Boeing 747 couldn't be a more regular thing. Everybody knows about that. And say, I don't know whether I would approve these things or not. But the point is that Boeing 747 can go through it's designed to go through the sky at 10 times the velocity of a hurricane. Now the resistance increases as the second power of the speed, so that the actual velocity of the interaction of an airplane, Boeing 747, is 100 times the velocity of a hurricane. You think about the velocity of a hurricane, these are the interactions that actually, the relationship to the environment, that ship is designed to be able to carry out cope with absolutely competently. I'd be able to have that ship weighing 200 tons fully loaded, making a landing, between 200 tons into contact with the earth, 150 miles an hour, and have the music going, it's try to keep it down. So, whether you're impressed or not, I'm deeply impressed with that design. And the man, it is because of that, it did have this military significance, developing those ships. Who's going to really run the world? The line supply control, that's all this fight had, all the scientific benefit to get where it has gotten, at any rate. In order to have that ship, you also have up in the fire cabinet where the pilots and engineers are, there are almost 1,000 instruments. And those instruments are telling about everything critical on the ship, the pressures here, the temperatures there, the stresses. And we have a number of engineers then and pilots to watch those dials, and they see something doing this going to let out of order, then there's another dial next to you that make it match and automated response set up. Every once in a while, the pilot, chief pilot, or other pilot, notice the lack of information coming in those instances. And you realize that something is really going wrong. You have to then go off automated, take it over the control, only by virtue of being a human being with a mind and access to the principles of the universe can you really coordinate to save that ship. This becomes really very impressive to me then, that human beings have that kind of a reference to the laws of the universe itself. We don't know of any other creature having this extraordinary kind of accessibility. I want you to then think about a really very big design that makes it Boeing 747 absolutely nothing. Not be the design of an eternally regenerative universe. As far as physics, you find out today, there's no experimental evidence energy being created, being lost. Apparently, the universe deals a minimum set of intertransforming to take care of eternal self-regeneration, where the gravitational effectiveness is just a little more powerful than the radiational, so that the conservation of gravity is simply holding some sort of same energy investment, but I'd like to understand principle. Think about a hexagon. And there's 6 edges of the hexagon have 6 radii. And the radii of the hexagon and the chords are the same length. Consider those to be vectors. And the fact that we find that with every energy event there are always 6 moves to be made. So you have 6 vectors to invest. The 6 vectors going out radially are trying to explode, and as they explode, they disintegrate, go away from each other, so that gravitational effectiveness is less. The other 6 contain them and come back and touch themselves. They close the ends, a closed system against an open. We find that the gravitational effectiveness of those vectors are more effective always than the radiation. So the tendency of the universe to explode and come apart is overcome fundamentally by you find the gravitational constant just those little grains in the radiation constant. And then you have an eternally regenerative universe. Now to be able to have an eternally regenerative universe with 92 regenerative chemical elements, and beautiful sociability, so absolutely unique behaviors, unique frequencies, fantastically high frequency in the transforming, the whole universe continually everywhere, transforming at different rates, doing all these things according to an extraordinary set of laws. There's bound to be, I would think, in view of the freedoms of design, the options of the design, where you can come out a daisy or a galaxy. In such a complexity of options, there's bound to be, I think, some kind of problems locally that need some of the same capability in the human mind, access to great laws of the universe to solve the problems. So that, what do I know that's common to all human beings in all history? I think problems. One thing that we're here for problem solving. That's what we're here for. Problems are not something just a temporary friction. If you're any good at problem solving, you get to run many more problems to solve. This increase exponentially. That's what we're here for, and we are then local monitors, have enormous information seeking capability, professionally to get the information, but the ability in principle to send that telescope to get information 11.5 billion light years away, information all around it. Go into the microcosm. So we have that fantastic kind of penetrating information capability that nothing else has. If those human beings on our planet have been able to take that inventory of that many galaxies, we've been able to take the light coming from all of them photographically, running through the spectroscope, and we've been able to take our planet, those kind of human beings have inventory of the relative abundance of all the chemical elements present in 11.5 billion light years sweep out. Fantastic capability. So I clearly we're not here for our muscle at all. We're here for our minds. Yet I see that muscle is still in control. That is a Brezhnev and a Freud, the power structure. And so we're here for our minds and not for muscle. I think the critical thing that's going on, humanity has gradually, with all these experiences, been able to invent the words to communicate. So I can give you what my experience has been. We can compound our experiences. The ability to write those, and so we can compound experiences of other generations. But we've developed 100,000 words in the Oxford Dictionary, that we have 100,000 nuances of experiences so unique that we need our own word, and we agreed on 100,000 of those words. A fantastic amount of agreement for humanity. If we've been able to go that far, and that kind of information that I've now been inventorying with you is something that is really highly available, Luckily I broke away from being a specialist and being a comprehensive and trying to pay attention to the big patterns. That's the only reason I'm not familiar enough to talk the way I am with the inventory of information. The point is, I see that we are quite clearly here as a local monitor to handle metaphysical problems. To really find principles, the right principles are operatives, to be able to employ them. The rate at which we require that capability is finally clear to me. We are a really new threshold. Somehow or other, we've now qualified to be able to get all together. We were given the problem of survival in order to find some principles. I see now at the point where that could be absolutely put aside, and I know we can get on with exactly success and not a failure. There are all inferiority complex about that. It should now be really free to become preoccupied with local universe problems, all of which it means some absolutely new universe opening up before us. I see then, here we are in birth. We're coming out of some new womb of permitted ignorance to allow us, as by design, to be born ignorant and have to find out, discover our minds are the whole show and not a muscle. See then, in this very critical condition where the mind, if power remains in the saddle, we are coming to a condition where the game of scoring, for instance, of money, is a very superficial affair. I'd just like to understand that a little better. Because in order to be able to show that we're going to carry on, so that we are given that hunger, so you go after food. So there really is a drive like that. And we have then, in order to have biological life on our planet, in order to be able to have a human life, to have this local monitor with this extraordinary capability to reach the information of the great laws of the universe itself. We have then, you and I can't take the sun radiation through our skin to keep growing. We have to have an enormous amount of energy to be regenerated. So we found all the vegetation designed to do that for us. Algae in the water, and then on the other vegetation, the dry land. And it does it by photosynthesis, so that the tree, in order to be able to expose enough leafage to really take in enough radiation, has to have roots, so in a great storm it will not be blown away. It has to have also roots by osmosis to take water out of the ground, osmosis by a one-way valve going this way, to water cool it, also to give it actually structural strength, because nature has all of the compression done in you and I and the trees by hydraulics, not by crystalline. Hydraulics absolutely non-compressible, distribute their loads. The reason why great tree could hold out a 5-ton branch here and not break off. You and I can't hold such weights with this kind of weight. So I find then the design of the human beings has to have the vegetation, and vegetation had to be rooted. So the vegetation is rooted, then also it's giving off gases, and the gases given off will soon, in the chemical photosynthetic process, will soon occupy the whole atmosphere, and the tree couldn't carry on anymore. It needs another kind of gas, so all the mammals are designed to take on the gases. They need the gases given off by the vegetation, converting it back. So here's this respiratory into complementation, absolutely unknown to man originally. So that we find then this enormous intercomplementation going on, so the vegetation then, being rooted, can't reach the other vegetation to procreate. Nothing could be, the whole system then, that design breaks down. So in order to make that work, nature then has all the insects and the birds and going back and forth constantly between all the vegetation. In order to be able to get all the worms and the birds and honeybees to do what they got to do, they're all given chromosomic drives. They're all given, then the honeybee simply keeps going after flower, and inadvertently knocks off pollen. So the honeybee is not there for the honey, for what if the bee gets out of the way, honey or the queen bee. The bee is there for the cross-fertilization. What you and I tend to call the side effects. We made the prime effect of getting out going out and getting our food, but we were really here for this other kind of monitoring task, which we didn't realize we were here to really be discovering that we have a mind. Now, but then the man sort of develops a kind of a comprehensive honey. Makes it sort of interchangeable for shoes and other things, get onto the ground, so we call it money. So money being honey being Now, when I became terribly interested in principles back in 1927, when I realized that we had a new child, we were penniless, And I realized it could be that if I went after this concept of environment controlling, we might, and to use a higher kind of capability of science, engineering, science, we're using only for the military side, it might be possible to make this thing work. Being feminists and so forth, said, what can an individual do that great corporations and great states can't do? Because number one, they can't think, they're just legal entities. But only human beings can think, and human beings can make up their minds to act much more rapidly than bureaucracy. So that I could have an advantage. Anyway, I said, one principle I'm absolutely convinced of the significance of the phenomenon of precession. Precession is not well understood. But precession is the effect of all independent bodies in the universe on other independent bodies in the universe. The effect of the sun on the earth is precessional and makes it go in orbit around it and not to fall in. We find then that the precession nucleus on the electrons go in orbit. Everything is in orbit in our universe. This is basic precessional effect. So I saw that everything really, the total success, the total regenerative universe, regeneration is cyclic. It is then closing circles, giving that conservation of the principle of the vector. I saw then what really is going on that you and I call side effect is the precessional effect. And we were going to pay attention to 180 degrees, meaning very much in the linear drive. We're very linear in our thinking. And fell very much to the idea of specialization. That's something very easy to get man to do. Just really look out for himself, leave it to somebody else. So I then said back in 1927, I'm so convinced of precession, the 90-degree effect. It could be that if instead of saying somebody to prove, nobody's going to prove what I was going to do, if I'm really going to commit the rest of my life to environment control and see how you cut down the weight and so forth, find whether you really can make man a success. I said, all right, I'm going to peel off. And it could be then that I really, the big thing, man just discovered years ago is to talk ecology. Well, ecologists long ago, but society didn't know about ecology. They were suddenly discovering the side effects. The big thing was suddenly coming into view. So back in 1927, just a little earlier, by the same kind of circumstances, I had acceleration of the circumstances that big society in general would come to the conditions of today. Anyway, I said, I can see that the big show is all this way. Closing on then, commit myself to what apparently nature is trying to make man a success. If I really commit myself, I said, going to first thing first. I got to know, see, what I need to do. I've got to make lighter weight structures or whatever it may be. There were quite clearly set of things that need to be attended to. But I would need to learn not be able to attend to them more effectively. At any rate, I said, I'm going to commit myself to doing this, and that could be, if by doing what nature wants you to do, you're going to find yourself supported completely indirectly. No, there's nothing to really match with any kind of bargaining. If I do this, then you're going to pay me, or you watch me and you're going to kind of reward me. It's not going to work that way at all. You really have to, it's an absolutely open system where you must never try to fool nature into supporting you. You must do what nature wants done. So this way I committed myself back in 1927, and the fact is I haven't been able to survive. It's been a very torturous affair. You have to watch it and your intuition all the time. This is far as sometimes as far as the flow goes. So like sailboat, you go to the mountain on the other tack. This is started over my fourth tack. Then you go as far as I can, and then you go this way. And so I have been able not only to survive, but I found the credit coming through. I started absolutely dependent on this unknown, no credit whatsoever. So the credit actually has gradually increased. So I'm able to get around, can get, when somebody asks me to come around and go do this and that. I never go anywhere unless I'm asked to. I don't have any manager or anybody trying to promote what I'm doing. I don't allow anybody who works with me close to promote anything and ask anybody to look at this at all. I must commit myself completely to dealing in artifacts. I saw that nature is continually transforming, that you could, by understanding principle, you could participate in the transforming. And when I develop an environment control, I'm really simply employing the same principle. Nature is to make the egg or the protein shell that encloses all the viruses and so forth. So, the fact is then, I'm absolutely confident today that what I undertook this way of really trusting the universe, and I'll show you the first day when I started to do this. Number one, my wife was running our little baby, didn't know what was going on. I had to make a my mind that she'd be much happier when she grew up. She found that I really committed myself this way instead of how to find special advantage for her. Anyway, my wife's family, my family also actually expect this, and it's a terrible thing to do. And all my friends have acted that way. So it was not an easy matter in the early days, but I'm now absolutely convinced that I'm not misleading any young people when I say you forget altogether, forever, earning a living. Just really look around and see what needs to be done. Things raised to you and I, we were sailors in the same boat. We begin to know very quickly somebody on board is a politician, and all the rest are really sailors, and you don't need any politician to tell you what to do on your boat. You really understand, you really coordinate very spontaneously. I point out that here is the synergy, and this phenomenon entropy, where things come apart, where energies come out, and the phenomenon entropy, where energy is being gathered. Our planet is one of the places where following Romer's discovery of the importing, exporting of energy that Einstein began to deal in. But all the stars are giving off energy, and the place where energy is being collected, because no universe would be eternally regenerative and concerned, would not be giving off anything unless it's seen by it. Because all the solar astronomically is a consequence of the tropic radiation given off, as you can see. So our planet is the only place we actually know anything about. Our planet is a place where energy is being collected randomly and going into converting random or this random solar and sun radiation into beautiful molecular structure. Everything biologically is continually exactly anti-entropic, so I call that syntropic. So we find very syntropic center, and we're here syntropically to solve problems. That's what we're here for. We're the most powerful syntropic force we know to be operative in the universe. Suddenly find we have really very great significance, and I would assume then that the universe would not then, if she has a very important function, she doesn't have it all in one basket, as the saying goes. I find that in order to have that vegetation do what it does, in order to have life on our planet at all, the vegetation can't then, the function is to impound radiation. So it can't have its young and its shadow because it won't have any radiation to impound. So one of the most important things with vegetation is to get its seed deployed. It has it's rooted, so it can't get off the soil at all. So it has to design the seeds in beautiful little airplanes and so forth. It go off. So tree is giving off 100,000 of these little airplanes. The possibility that in this random kind of broadcasting, that one's going to land there is very poor. But nature has a very important function and poor chance of actual survival to make many, many stops. In order to have this extraordinary kind of a function, you and I being born naked, helpless, so forth, having millions and millions of years to develop the point where we do have the words and enough information to discover those principles and communicate the way I am communicating with it, seems to be the chances of really coming through successfully must be very, very poor. So I assume that nature has many, many such stops. It would not look like the same in any other biosphere, any other kind of environmental condition. We have exactly the condition we'd have to have this particular kind of biosphere. But the temperature is such that we can be primarily made out of water, not freezing to death, but it may be very, very special condition. Incidentally, the only place we know about any water in these constellations. Think of the time of surface film of that water on our planet. Anyway, I would think then there's a very critical condition having been a great group boom of many things, with adequate resource can supply us, making all the trial and error experiments. Get where we are. But we're now at a point where we've really used up the nutriment. And the good analogy of this is just think of the chicken, the embryo in an egg, and has all these kinds of nutrients to take care of it. One thing it needs from outside is heat. I think must become a very slow rate. Otherwise, it gets too high, we could thrive. And then the chicken then uses all that nutriment. And finally, it's all complete inside the egg. And looking around, now it has a packing day building looking for more than that nutriment, breaks the egg open incidentally. I see us really in that kind of condition, just breaking open our egg is a permitted ignorance. We've been all in this. There's something now we really have to use our mind. And I'd say, the curves that I see indicate that within the next 10 years, mind comes in complete control of our world. So we do things you know this way we really think and we can really understand one another. The power is still in. We failed to qualify for our function. Power can't do this. we really, the point where mind must come in the supremacy over the power. And I think it's all to do with it. So in fact, this is my own lifetime, the amount of literacy around the world. The literacy of world society was about 90% when I was young, and it's not true anymore. And what's really happened in the way of information, nobody knew we were going to have radio, nobody knew we were going to have a telephone, nobody knew we were going to be able to talk around our world in a split second. All these things have come in very much what I call absolute surprise, evolutionary events that really were designed to be sure that we did get to the point where it's no longer just a pharaoh that's based on kind of, it's going to be, everybody has to be in on the bargain, and everybody has to really use their integrity, and everybody has to then be very spontaneously cooperative with others. This is we're going to have to go from being entropic, or give all things being separating, all that we organize today, looking out for this, me, looking out for this, my family, looking out for our company, looking out for our side, everybody against everybody else. We're going to have to, within the next, my figures would say, the next 5 years, all the sovereignties of earth have to go. Have to stop altogether. We're all very well in the vegetation era where you had the roots. But now it's the metals coming from around the world, they're recirculating, makes it possible really to take care of the higher and higher performance. Have absolutely free flow of the metals. All the resources have to be continually transferred around. So if you find something familiar around you coming apart, don't be long. If it doesn't come about, we're going to fail. If we're in failure for revolution. But if it is a bloody revolution, we're all through. If it's a power revolution, we're through. The only way we're going to really get through is really using our mind, really continue. Don't use your head for battering rams, use your head to think. I'm convinced that's the test. But each human being, the integrity of each human being, each minute of his consciousness is like, now on is really there, because I think it's actually touch and go whether we can make it. I know we have the option to make it, but whether we're going to have this slice of it completely touch and go. I'm really going to depend on that some strange disposition in each one of us, whether you're going to throw it in the floor, or you're going to put it in the wastebasket, or whether you're going to saw it or not saw it. But tiniest little things are going to be, it's not each people doing something very big, it's the integrity of each human being every minute. And I couldn't be more moved from here that I find myself living almost 80, that I'm here, and if you would ask me to come and talk, you admit yourself to not letting me express my experiences, my thoughts. I find this very hopeful kind of sign. And I'm biggest, most hopeful sign I have is the following. We have, throughout all early history of human beings, as with all the mammals, the male sweeps out large areas and the female and the young. And the male human kept bringing hunting and bringing things into the woman. She found that had a fire, we could make the food last a little longer, cauterizing it. Make a fire took a lot of time. Fires were dangerous, so they had to tend the fire. So the women tended the hearth, and the man brought everything home. Not only did man bring home his food, life support, but he also, gradually woman lived as domesticated. He didn't have to do so much of that kind. But daddy has always been bringing home the news about the rest of the world. The kids at home didn't have. There's one way their home contact with the world came to the father. And mothers talked to other mothers, and their men brought them. So she did some sort of secondary integration of the information he gave the kids. And mom and dad told you this way, your grandfather did it, all people before he learned this is what you do on these written foundations. So all the information came to the young life came really down to the parents. They have absolute authority on what's going on in the world and how to carry on. This was when I was born. My Tony discovered the pistol wireless, but we did not go into use until I was 12 years of age. That's SOS, Morse code. So when I was young, all my friends, we were trying to make some of these apparatus and so forth. There's a lot of experimental work, but this doesn't come in until I'm fairly I was 3 years of age when the electrons were discovered. Nobody paying attention to them discovered. That's not a very popular event. When I was 23 years of age, we had the first voice on the radio. When I was 27, we had the first licensed broadcasting station. In 1932, when I was 1927, I was 32 years of age. Daddy came home and kid said, "Daddy, come in here quickly, listen to the radio. Man just thrown across the line." Daddy said, "What?" Daddy came in really listening to me. And that time on, Daddy never brought home the news again. This is very much more sudden, fundamentally, and society is tending to really look at the big significance of what's going on here. Because then the people got their jobs on the radio, got it by virtue of their popularity, of their vocabulary, of their pronunciation, so forth, and size of vocabulary, and the versatility of using it. Then suddenly came something very much bigger with the television. Television is just not a true radio because the speed of sound is only 700 miles an hour. You can only hear it for a very short distance. It has to be gassed to be disturbed by the waves. There's no sound in space. But the sight sees at 700 million miles an hour. Our sight is exactly 1 million times faster than our hearing, and its range goes into the ability to see the live show coming from the ground 1 million light years ago, not 5 million times 6.5 trillion to get an idea how many miles that we are seeing. Furthermore, the sound language became liberated. Daddy kept bringing home the news. That's the way he thought they said it. But he said it so many different ways that finally tried to have different kinds of languages. And the kid he's trying to copy it. So gradually, in the copying, things get very, very sloppy. You get very different kinds of ethnic languages. But we have, so the sound language is a very limited one, and how many people understand that word. But the sight language is absolutely universal. You recognize that as water, whatever, maybe you don't have to remember it wasn't language problem. I found when it came in with television, it was actually a million-fold step up in information distributed and basing about Earth. So the times Daddy and Mom, Daddy and Mom listening at authority. And this way the authority says it, and that kids emulate the language of the people on the radio television. This is where the whole language changed, not through school, but through this extraordinary new medium. And in fact, I find everywhere I go around the world today, the literacy and the communication capability is there. But this wasn't there yesterday at all. So the evolution powerfully at work here. But the big thing was that in order for us to go through being born, making happen, you had to have this phenomenal tradition of daddies and moms who raised care to ensure that their life best would know where you do it. So the tradition is fantastic strong, but nature absolutely deliberately cut off that tradition with introducing it strong, completely unexpected wireless. How do you talk about wireless? You don't have slice idea how to do it, but it's to do it. Now, somebody like to have it fairly clearly understood. I think we have to have the umbilical cord while the child is in the womb. You can't get the oxygen to purify his body going from his mother's umbilical cord. Suddenly, the child out of the cut it. So the child can't start running around right away. It's not ready to operate independently. It takes quite a long time. I see what happened in this 1927 was, and in television, very much more powerfully, the first students to be dissident at the Native World News at the University of California, Berkeley, were born the year the television came to American home. Suddenly, the young people were saying, I know Mom and Dad love me very much, and I love them very much. I see they don't know what's going on. They're not getting us to move, and so forth. And here's the authority. Dad and Mom are no longer the authority. They're just human beings to be loved and so forth, but they didn't know what's going on. And it felt intuitively saying they seem to be very locally preoccupied, and the compassion of youth that's gone is very, very great, and they see people in trouble all around the world. And you couldn't get them just to be preoccupied with the troubles locally ever again. These are incredible irreversibilities that nature was introducing, absolutely unexpected by any society whatsoever, anywhere. So I see that this young world coming through, where Daddy and Mom are no longer the authority, and the child spontaneously, his brain says that's your smell, and his brain says that's your see. The child says that's what I see, that's what I smell. The child used to say, being told, my mother said, "Child, that man said, don't say that down, that's your daddy's boss, he loses a job." And my daddy loses a job, what should I say? They were told to lie. This lying is going on and on and on, but then a young girl coming out of this and being spontaneously truthful, they don't have to teach the truth, as I see, as I smell. You have then a young girl coming through, no longer feeling that they're no longer being told, never mind what you think. That they are intuitively aware that the older world is preoccupied in much too short-sighted ways, and the world is in trouble. So the young girl doesn't know what you ought to do about it. But the point is that they're spontaneously truthful. Nobody's saying to them, you've got to get over your sensitivity, life is tough. They're all keeping their sensitivity. So my hope is, all of my hope is I see a completely new world coming through that is not being de-genius and so forth by the fears of the parents, and that is spontaneously truthful and is concerned about the totality. I'll say evolution is manifesting something. When I wrote about this is by far the most encouraging thing I know. And I find that young girl deeply impressed with the fundamental mystery. Not the mystery to be told to understand in terms of well-known religion. They're finding this mystery, intuitively aware it is there. And here of all this synergetic phenomena they know is phenomena of love, because stones don't love stones. Little child is born with something, any kind of phenomena that's being loved, that's phenomena of love. And maybe the parents in love, they do something like this gal. There's the point is, love is a very extraordinary mysterious thing that young girl feels. Other synergetic, other mystery. So I think that the young girl keeping its sensitivity, deeply impressed with loving. I find the young girl no longer ashamed of loving, no longer ashamed of their sensitivity. They really have very frequently grown men, 21, so forth, coming up now and kiss me on the lips, and they say, "You told me the truth." And they kiss me with a tenderness my mother kissed me. This tenderness there's a tenderness and a truthfulness and the inclusiveness. Our whole hope is there. You feel that way, but I can tell you, this last year I've had speaking engagements averaging over 1,000 each one. I've had 150 such engagements in 1 year. As I'm going around the world, I'm finding a young world everywhere. I'm glad to say quite a few older people sprinkling amongst them, but I find all around the world what I've been saying here seems reasonable. What you're really saying to each other. Remember, I think precessionally and not this way. You're really not talking to me, because if you were with me all along and I said what I said, you might say, I like what you said, that sounds reasonable. But you wouldn't stand, it wouldn't stand. You're talking to each other and not to me. Don't you realize how powerful this is and how important, because the great grand strategy of divide and conquer of the Hitler, for instance, was get right. My father doesn't even know what his kid is thinking. The kid doesn't know his dad is thinking. The ability to really stop humanity in knowing what he's thinking. I find it very important to let you know, as quick as I can, that I'm having this experience now where the whole young world is feeling the way you feel about that. It's very important for you to know. And I have very great confidence that this is the way, this is the disposition of man. Right?
climb onto the stool to get into it, right? And this whole place.